Hey guys, it's Sasha. The UK economy is in deep doo-doo, and this morning UK inflation data turned up and it's pretty bad. UK Consumer Price Index came in at 10.1%, meaning inflation has now been at over 10% in the UK for 7 consecutive months and for 8 out of the last 9 months. At the same time, inflation in Europe has fallen from 10.6% at the peak to 6.9%, and inflation in the United States has dropped from 9.1% last June to just 5% in March. So while the situation in the rest of the world seems to be normalizing, seems to be improving, the UK appears to be in dire straits. UK GDP was flat in February and has been anemic for over a year. GDP in the United States was 22% higher in Q4 last year than it was in Q4 2019, before COVID arrived. Even though there was this blip due to COVID, the economy rebounded and then some. But over the same time period, the UK GDP is still lower than it was 3 years ago. And perhaps the biggest problem and the main reason that this is happening is the insane level of incompetence of the UK government. The inflation data was published this morning and it's headline news everywhere in every single newspaper, every single media organization, because it's dire, it's really bad. But just 1 hour ago, as I'm recording this video, the UK Parliament had Prime Minister's questions. This is 30 minutes of Prime Minister answering the most pertinent, the most critical questions and topics of the day. And do you know how many questions in that session there were about inflation and the economy? None. Zero. Not a single fucking question about inflation on a day when new inflation data came out and looks this bad. The reason why this happened is, of course, the UK government completely fucked up in managing the economy through COVID and since COVID and through the whole Brexit transition. And the opposition, the party that is meant to hold the government to account, the party that is meant to be providing the alternative, those guys voted for the same dumbass measures throughout this whole period. The Parliament passed all of them pretty much unanimously, so they can't throw any stones because they sit in the same glass house. So here we are. And the UK economy is going down the toilet right in front of us. The cost of living crisis in the UK is far worse than in any other major economy by a country mile. And the UK government is sitting there pretending that nothing is happening. Fingers in the ears, yeah, it's so fine. In this latest report, the price of food has increased by 19.2%, which is the highest increase in 45 years. And the problem seems to be getting worse because food inflation is not slowing down, it's accelerating. In the UK, the Consumer Price Index does not include housing. This is a key difference to the CPI data in the US and the CPI data in the UK, but there is a UK equivalent called CPIH. And CPIH currently sits at 8.9%, which is also staggeringly high. And CPIH is of course more relevant because housing costs are a critical component of people's budgets. And you have to pay rent or mortgage just to be able to live somewhere. And if you look at this chart, you can see the really big ugly problem. It is not one of these two lines up here, that's CPI and CPIH, which are pretty bad. But the problem is in this line down here, which is OOH. OOH is the occupier's housing costs. It is a proxy for the increase in the cost of rents and mortgages, how much it costs you to live in your house. And you can see that it was sitting below 2% right up until the end of 2021 and has only slowly started moving upwards. And in the latest data, it's at 4.0%. And the reason that this is a massive problem is that this metric suffers from lag. It is hugely under-reading what is actually happening. When house prices increase, people don't immediately start paying more for their house. Your mortgage will only go up via a big jump when you next move, which could be in a year, in 5 years, whenever. When mortgage rates increase, you will only feel the pain when you have to remortgage. And you only have to start paying more rent whenever it's time to renegotiate or whenever you happen to move. So at the moment, the official rate of inflation on housing costs sits at 4.0%. But the latest data from Rightmove suggests that rent prices increased by 9.7% year on year in Q4 2022. And the year before that, rent prices increased by 9.9% year on year in Q4 2021. So while official data says the cost of housing has pretty much not changed, rent prices have increased 20% in the last 2 years. At the same time, the Bank of England is incapable of actually making any decisions by themselves and just end up copying whatever the Federal Reserve does in the US. In 2021, CPI in the UK increased from 0.7% in January to 5.4% in December. And the Bank of England, what did they do? They sat there twiddling their thumbs and fucking around instead of actually doing anything at all about it. The first increase from 0.1 to 0.25% only came on the 16th of December, right at the end of the year, letting inflation run for the whole 12 months. And as inflation went all the way to above 10% last year, the Bank of England has now raised rates to a whopping 4.25%. Nowhere near enough to actually make a dent. The main reason they haven't increased rates faster, other than being really shit at their jobs, is because they wasted the whole of 2021 playing politics, giving speeches, attending dinners, instead of doing their fucking jobs. And now we have a big problem because mortgage rates are increasing fast. The vast majority of mortgages in the UK are fixed for a period of up to 5 years. So when the time comes to remortgage, the increase to households is going to be substantial. In 2021, you could get a mortgage with a fixed rate of less than 1%. Some people on higher loan to values would get just above 1%. It was cheap. Getting a mortgage has now become much more difficult after 1,500 products were withdrawn in the autumn, and generally there's an economic slowdown, and the rates have now gone up to about 4%. If you had a mortgage on 1% 3 years ago, it is now time to remortgage, and you can get one of the best deals out there and pay 4% instead, and your monthly repayments as a result will increase by 40%. But the Bank of England will have to keep increasing rates now that they have massively screwed up. They're way too late to actually have any meaningful impact with their increases. So if you are, say, remortgaging later this year or next year, you could have to take out a deal at an interest rate of 6%. And if you take out a remortgage at 6% when you were on the 1% before, your monthly repayments will be 70% higher. According to Octane Capital, Brits spend 22% of their gross monthly income before taxes on their mortgage. If you take out tax, student loan repayments, council tax, that increases to probably about 30%. So if you're spending 30% of your take-home pay on your mortgage and your monthly repayment goes up by 70%, that's another 20% of your take-home pay that you're going to have to magic out of somewhere. £400 to £500 for the average household. You're going to have to go and find it. And what is the government going to do to help people? Well, they go and appoint Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor, a guy who has zero financial background, has never worked in a bank or a finance company, and instead worked as an English language teacher in Japan, and then had 3 failed startups, including one exporting jam to Japan, according to his Wikipedia page. You could not make this up. So this guy, no financial background, but instead, before becoming an MP, he worked in PR. This guy is now in charge of fixing the economy. This guy is just announced his budget. Tax brackets have been frozen, so in real terms it means income tax is going up. The cap on energy costs is staying at £2,500 for the average household for 3 months from April, and will then be set by Ofgem afterwards. So everyone in the UK is now paying insane amounts for their gas and electricity. But here is the underlying price of natural gas in the UK. After 2 crazy years, it is now dropped to the same level it was in July 2021. Oil prices are now lower than before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but while commodity prices have tanked, while they are falling, the price of energy is going through the roof. It's amazing how quickly prices for energy go up when commodity prices increase. The moment gas prices goes up, quick, increase bills, make customers pay more, make the bills go absolutely through the stratosphere. But when the prices collapse back down, it of course involves a lot of process. It takes years for that to filter through to customers because the UK government is corrupt and doesn't want to actually intervene in the racket that the energy companies are orchestrating. And you can go and look at every single energy company out there magically, as if out of absolutely nowhere, posting record profits. Where did that money come from? Did they find the magic fucking money tree? The US is busy trying to do something. They are passing massive new laws like the Inflation Reduction Act, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, huge pieces of legislation which are investing in green technology, encouraging new businesses to set up in the United States, move production to the United States, massive updates to the road and energy infrastructure, electric cars. Meanwhile, the IMF is busy forecasting that the UK will be the worst performing major economy in the world, shrinking by 0.3% in 2023. The cost of housing is growing at 4% in the CPIH data and will eventually have to catch up with real-world increases in house prices and rents. So whenever that does come through in the coming months, this will exert more and more and more upward pressure on inflation data. The UK government's incompetence in managing Brexit means that people are now paying 20% more for their food today than they did 1 year ago. And many of the basic staples are up way over 50%. Inflation-adjusted wages have been falling for the last 2 years and are now lower than they were in June 2019. And at the weekly Prime Minister's Questions, when all of this is coming to the breaking point, how many questions, how many points of discussion were there about inflation? None. How many questions were there about the cost of living crisis? 0. What the actual fuck? There is no accountability whatsoever. The schmucks sitting in government are sitting there being completely inept. Rishi Sunak could try to actually pull a finger out. Maybe, do something to fix the economy. Maybe start by exterminating the obscene corruption throughout Whitehall. But instead, his wife is busy pretending she doesn't live in the UK to apparently save £20 million in tax, and Rishi Sunak is busy passing laws that specifically benefit childminder agencies instead of those working direct for no apparent reason, casually forgetting by accident to mention that his wife just happens to be a part owner of a child-minding agency. The problems with the UK economy start with the corruption, ineptitude, and incompetence of the dimwits sitting in our government. Why the fuck is this okay? We are all getting outraged for 5 minutes after finding out that, Matt Hancock's pub landlord got huge tens of millions of pounds worth of government contracts to supply PPE, whatever that was. But then we just move on to the next bit of news and completely forget it doesn't matter, that happened yesterday. There is an old Russian saying that says, a fish rots from the head. And this is exactly what we see happening here. The UK economy is fucked. And the worst part is that the reasons are self-inflicted. We point fingers at corruption in third world countries and laugh at them while mind-boggling levels of corruption are happening right here, right in front of us, and causing the UK economy to collapse. Instead of passing laws to stimulate small businesses, attract new technology, attract new companies, the UK government is removing caps on bankers' bonuses. This is disgusting, and there is absolutely nothing that anyone is going to do about it. This is the reality that we live in.